All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Newt News. The All-Star game was this past week, but not a lot of games, but we did get some pretty exciting news from the front office. The Cardinals are indeed selling at the trade deadline, which is unfortunate. Before we get into that, I'd like to thank our very special guest today, Jacob, good friend of ours, first time on the podcast. So as is our tradition, we're going to ask you your four intro questions. Ask for your favorite all-time Cardinal, favorite current Cardinal, favorite non-Cardinals player, and your favorite team that's not the Cardinals. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, cool. Really happy to be here. I think favorite all-time Cardinal is probably David Freese. Because like that moment in the 2011 World Series is sort of what got me into baseball. As a kid, it was just really cool to watch. And a moment I'll remember forever. Favorite current Cardinal? I like watching Jordan Walker a lot. He's super fun and exciting, and I'm really excited to see how he develops. So I'd say probably Jordan Walker. I also like Newt Bar, obviously, but Jordan Walker probably right now. He's, probably the best hitter on the team at the moment, which is really fun. My favorite team that's not the Cardinals is the Mariners, probably. And so then my favorite non-Cardinal is Julio Rodriguez, because another very exciting young player. A lot of fun to watch. Watching him hit 41 home runs in the home run derby was very exciting. But yeah.
Yeah, we got that at bat in the ninth inning against Craig Kimbrell, where he got walked. It would have been cool if he hit a double. I was really plugging for the home run derby to end the game. That would have been exciting, but unfortunately we didn't get that. But yeah, the trade deadline is in like 2 weeks, and John Mozeliak publicly announced that the Cardinals are going to be trading people, most likely going to be sellers at the deadline. Jordan Montgomery, Jack Flaherty, Chris Stratton, and Jordan Hicks are four names that I've heard are most likely on their way out. What do you think of those guys potentially being gone, and do you think there's anyone else that should be traded at the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that we should trade those guys, last year of the contract, and the team is not playing well right now. So I think it's definitely a smart move. I don't know exactly where they're going to go, but I do think that trading those guys is important. And I think, like, I saw somewhere that O'Neill is maybe also a slight consideration. I know we haven't seen a lot of him. He's kind of been hurt all year, which is a little bit unfortunate. But yeah, in terms of other people that I think I'm in the minority in that I really think that we should like fully sell at this deadline and go into more of a rebuild. I know there's various tweets from all sorts of Cardinals reporters and media saying the Cardinals absolutely will not trade Paul Goldschmidt or Nolan Arenado, which I can understand from like a business perspective. They're still selling like 35,000 tickets a game. People are coming to see those two players draw a lot, obviously. I can understand that aspect of it. And for, such a storied franchise, it would be a little bit sad to lose both those players and have a team that would then, I imagine, probably lose 100 games if you get rid of both of those guys, plus Jack Flaherty, Jordan Montgomery, Jordan Hicks, like who's pitching for us at that point, But I think that it's the right move because, the team's really struggling right now. Paul Goldschmidt is in the second to last year of his contract. And so if you're keeping Paul Goldschmidt, you're committing to trying to compete next year. Which is, in my opinion, not the most reasonable thing. Like, I think it can happen if, we make the right moves at the trade deadline, we sign the right free agents in the offseason. But I think it's a big risk. And then if it doesn't pan out, you're either trading half a season of Paul Goldschmidt, or you're probably spending a lot of money to extend him. And he's an aging first baseman, DH player that I don't really want us sinking a bunch of money on, especially if we're not competitive again. That's not where I want the money going. So I think in sort of just like a pros and cons list, I think there's a lot of pros to trading Goldie right now because people will give us more for a year and a half of control. The team's not competing right now. And it would also allow us to move Jordan Walker to first base. I know he's not had a ton of games in the outfield, but when he's been there, the defense has been, in all honesty, hard to watch. He's still got negative WAR. I'm not loving watching Jordan Walker play outfield every day. His hitting is amazing and he should be in the lineup every day, but in the outfield, he definitely needs some work. And I know he can improve. He's a young player. He's athletic. He hasn't had a lot of games, but I think it would just sort of give him a more clear position. He can sort of get settled in. And I think that he's a good enough, hitter that he can, not, it's hard to replace Goldschmidt. He just won an MVP, but come close at least as currently one of the best hitters on our lineup. So that's what I think we should do with Paul Goldschmidt. Arenado, I'm less, in for trading. I still think that we should, just because I'm of the opinion when you're losing this many games, you should at least consider a rebuild, and a rebuild involves trading your superstars over the age of 30, looking towards the young future, stuff like that. I know that Nato is, he's still playing well, minus the defense. His defense has been not great at times, but he's hitting well, especially recently. He's been really hot, and he's still got a lot of years left on his contract and a lot of good productive years. He's not as old as Paul Goldschmidt. But I don't know if the Cardinals are in a position right now to compete in the time span of his contract, which I know might sound crazy to people because, it's the Cardinals. How can we be bad for 3 straight years? But I think if you think about the fact that we're trading Jordan Montgomery, we're trading Jack Flaherty, we're trading Jordan Hicks, that's our 3 good pitchers right now. Michaelis has been pretty decent, and Stratton's been okay out of the bullpen. But other than that, the bullpen has really been hard to watch recently. I mean, at the start of the year, the starters were, giving up tons of runs in the first inning. Now they're giving us 5-6 innings, and then the bullpen is blowing the lead in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. It's just we can't seem to find a guy that's good for more than a week in a row. We can't just find any consistency there. And I think it's really hard to contend when you have a bullpen that's that bad. And then if you lose what I think are our 2 best starting pitchers, it's just going to be hard to win games, even if the offense is really good. Because I think we all agree the offense is playing pretty well right now. We're scoring a lot of runs. We should be winning more games than we are. And the pitching's letting us down a little bit. And when you think about the fact that Jordan Montgomery's gone, Jack Flaherty's gone, you look at the rotation for next year, it's okay, we've got Michaelis. We've got probably Steven Matz is in the rotation, which I'm not happy to see. I know he had a good start last time out, but I'm just not too big on Steven Matz. Liberatore is probably going to be in the rotation, I imagine. I know he got sent down, but who else are you going to start? Waino will have retired, so he won't be there. And then it's who else are we putting in the rotation? Maybe Zach Thompson. I know they sent him down to be a starter. I don't know why they did that, but they did. Maybe Palante goes back to being a starter. I just feel there's a lot of missing pieces there. Even if you make a big free agent splash on a free agent pitcher, you still probably got 1, maybe 2 spots to fill in the rotation with actual quality pitchers. And I think that's going to be hard to do this offseason with the lack of aces available. The other thing I look at is that if you get Paul Goldschmidt off the books, you get Nolan Arenado off the books, Waino's retiring, the most interesting free agent probably of all time is happening this offseason. And we would be paying basically nobody any money besides Contreras and Michaelis. We'd have so much room. We'd have a great young core. Signing Shohei Ohtani makes so much sense. It'll never happen, but it would make so much sense. Which I know you've talked a lot about, Andrew. You really want that to happen, but it would just... It'd be great, but it would not. It's not reasonable, but that's another reason that I think maybe moving on from Goldie and Nato could potentially be a good idea, which I know is not a very popular opinion, but it's one that I hold.
I mean, that's one way to get me to agree with you, right? Is to bring up Ohtani signing. But yeah, I think Jordan Walker moving to first base long term is a pretty viable decision. He's hitting 283 this season with an 803 OPS, 118 OPS plus, but he's negative 0.7 baseball reference WAR. So that's just awful for his defense. You can't have that. I know we've been drawing comps between Walker and Nolan Gorman. Nolan Gorman's defense was below average last season, but he still had positive WAR despite not hitting nearly as well as Walker this year. Yeah, Nolan Gorman's improved to a league average second baseman this year, but how long is that going to take for Jordan Walker, who's very, very below average defensively right now, probably one of the worst defenders in the entire league? So moving him to first, although he has a lot of athletic ability and could probably develop into a really good outfielder in like 1 or 2 years, probably not what we want to do if we want to compete right away, which is what the Cardinals seem to want to do next season.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. The starting rotation next season, I think, regardless of whether or not we would trade Flaherty and Montgomery, it would look really bad. Steven Matz, I think, was the only starter signed on for last year before we extended Michaelis. Michaelis has looked one of his worst seasons as a Cardinal this year. And then, yeah, Palante, Thompson, have it whatever way you want. It's not a viable starting rotation. So unless we go out and sign one of those free agents like Julio Urias, who hasn't been great this year, Aaron Nola hasn't been great this year, and of course Shohei Ohtani, none of those free agents are guys that would have been on the Cardinals' radar, say, like 2 or 3 years ago. So I don't think, unless we have a real change of heart, which is honestly possible the way we've been playing, there might be a philosophical change in the way the organization spends. But we have to go out there and trade for guys. Dylan Cease might be available, Lucas Giolito, Shane Bieber, although I think he just got hurt, which is not good for our outlook. So we have to go and trade for aces, which is what Mo has been known to do at certain times. So I don't think it's entirely impossible that we put together a solid rotation before next year without spending money on free agents. But it is definitely going to be really hard. And I don't think you can sit here and not trade Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado without knowing that you're going to build a viable rotation for next year. Because we've seen what this rotation looks like with Montgomery, who I think should have been an all-star. Jack Flaherty's been really solid. Even with these two guys in the rotation, the pitching has just been dreadful. Like you can't run this out there, even with the lineup that this Cardinal team has. It reminds me of a lot of, I hate to say it, but it reminds me a lot of Angels teams I've watched in the past. You've got really good lineups and you just can't pitch. And that doesn't ever lead to success in the big leagues.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you hear Marmol in the post-game interviews and he's like, if you score 8 runs, you score 9 runs, you should win the game. And he's right, like the team is just not supporting the offense with the pitching at all.
Yeah, you mentioned Ollie Marmol, and I know we've had our fair share of discussion about him. You tweet every day about how he should no longer have a job. So if you wanted to go into that a little bit.
Yes, I do tweet daily that Mozeliak and Marmol should be fired. And I can understand the argument that it's not Marmol's fault. The entire team is not playing well. And I can understand that, but personally, I just feel like if suddenly they hired a bunch of new staff like around Marmol this year, it's all like their first years besides Marmol. If the entire team is having like career worst seasons or very bad seasons comparatively, like they can't all just be in a slump the entire season at the same time. I mean, they could, but it would be a crazy coincidence. And so I feel like coaching has to play some role in that. And also, I feel like if you are coaching a team that's this bad, that's such a storied franchise, that at the start of the season, everyone was like, you're contending for the division title, maybe the favorites to win even, or at least second after the Brewers probably, because I don't think anyone saw the Reds winning the division. Then if that's the expectation and you go into this season where you're projected, I think right now to lose like 94, 95 games, that's just not okay. And that shouldn't be acceptable. And you can't just be like, well, bad season, try again next year. Like, I think some changes need to happen. And like you said, that might be at the front office level in terms of how we spend in free agency. But I just think if all the players are underperforming their expectations and the team's underperforming their expectations, at some point that has to go back to the coaching staff and the manager and the guy who put the team together and said, we have 6 starting pitchers and that we can win. That's just blatantly not true. Like he was just wrong. And so I think there needs to be some level of accountability for that. I know Mo's been with the organization for a very long time, and it's unlikely that he leaves, and it's probably unlikely Marmol leaves as well, since Mozeliak has openly stated multiple times that they fully support him. But I just think when a team is underperforming this badly, someone's got to take accountability, and someone's got to, you got to change some things to try and make it better. Because I think, Like there could be a real chance that we make some smart free agent moves, we make some good trades, but then you come back again next year and the team's still underperforming again. And so I think just changes need to happen. I don't know what they are, but I personally am not the biggest Marmol or Mozeliak fan, and think that at least I just think change should happen when you play this badly. You can't just be okay with it, is my real stance.
Yeah, I think one key asset, we talked about Yachty leaving, but he wasn't really present a lot of last season. I think the pitching has been so bad this year. It's been a little bit overlooked, but Mike Maddox has departed and he's gone to the Rangers now. I think to be closer to his family. And yeah, you look at last offseason and all the free agent pitchers that were available. And personally, I'm of the opinion that not many of those pitchers would have helped you. Like Verlander has been hurt a lot of the year, underperformed. Rodon has been hurt a lot of the year. Quintana's been hurt. That's the guy I really wanted to bring back. The one free agent pitcher I look at that was like, that would have been a really good signing is Nathan Eovaldi. And he's been with the Rangers under Mike Maddox. So I think Mike Maddox, as much flack as he got last offseason for like allowing too many walks and whatnot, and like certain criticisms he's gotten, he's turned Nathan Eovaldi from pretty middling pitcher into like a solidified ace. Like I have him fantasy right now. He's undroppable. Like who would have thought at the start of the year that was going to happen? But yeah, I think the coaching really is the issue. We have a lot of first year coaches. Jeff Albert got bullied off the coaching staff by essentially people on Twitter, which is not ideal. I'm starting to maybe regret saying that he should have been fired so many times, but I mean, Marmol can only do so much when all of your coaches really want to leave. But the same goes for Mo. I think he's hindered a lot by the owners. He's not able to spend at the top tier free agent level. Like he could sign Corey Seager, he could sign Bryce Harper, but was the front office or was the ownership group really going to allow that to happen? And the answer is probably not. He's only really allowed to sign Steven Matz. Wilson Contreras is the most expensive free agent the Cardinals have ever signed. And I don't think that's because Mo doesn't want to spend money. I think it's just because he's not really allowed to. And I mean, working under the constraints that we've had, I think he's done a pretty good job. Like you watch the All-Star game, right? Everyone saw Randy Arozarena and Adolis Garcia make phenomenal catches to open the game. They were facing each other in the home run derby. Zach Gallen was starting for the National League. But I mean, who's to say that other GMs would have made those same decisions? Adolis Garcia was DFA'd by the Rangers before no one picked him up, and they just outrighted him to AAA. So a lot of these decisions you can't really fault Mo for, I feel like, although a lot of people tend to disagree with that.
I mean, I don't know. I understand those arguments of like, okay, at the time, people thought these were, good ideas. Obviously you mentioned the Adolis Garcia thing. I think that's understandable. I just think that like, for me, it was more about the comments he made at the start of this season where he was like, we weren't really active in the starting pitching market. We think we have 6 starting pitchers. When I think everyone in the offseason was pretty clear that the Cardinals' biggest need was starting pitching. And the one guy we signed was a 1-year extension to Adam Wainwright, which has turned out abysmal. But I just think that like those sorts of comments, and then like now recently he's sort of been like, well, we were kind of active, but the guys we went after didn't want to come here, or it just didn't work out. Like I wish there was more consistency in what he was saying. And I was just, I think, more annoyed about the fact that like at the start of the season, the front office felt so confident that, we're a contending team. This is great. We added Contreras and signed Waino again, and everything's going to be all right. When I think if you look at the team from last year, there were clear needs that needed to happen that weren't necessarily addressed or talked about enough, or at least like just some acknowledgement. Like even if you can't, go sign, a Max Scherzer or Justin Verlander, who I know haven't turned out well, but like to give an example of a high profile free agent signing, even if you can't, at least being able to say, we wanted to bring in more starting pitching. We weren't able to get it done. Like at least that honesty would be appreciated, I think, especially. I mean, the quote's been memed 1,000 times that he said we have 6 starting pitchers. So I think just some more clarity and honesty and transparency would be appreciated, which I know is asking a lot of a GM of a sports team, but that's sort of where my stance is. And, I'm not a huge fan of all the trades. Obviously the Ozuna trade was in hindsight, horrible. Not the biggest fan of getting Liberatore back for Randy Arozarena, but at the time, people probably would have agreed with them, and maybe I would have been one of those people. So, it's hard to look back and criticize that, and that I can be sympathetic for.
Yeah, I mean, if back then you traded Jack Flaherty and Alex Reyes for Marcell Ozuna, people would have been furious. They're like, your top pitching prospects, what are we doing? Zach Allen and Alcantara were not really high-profile guys, really on anybody's radar. But yeah, I agree. The 6 starting pitchers comment at the start of the season is very incriminating. You just can't expect if your pitching is this bad at this point in the season, you can't look back and be like, oh yeah, we thought everything was going to be fine. That's a pretty big oversight on his part. But yeah, I definitely agree that Mozeliak should be held accountable for some of those decisions. I'm not sure that he should necessarily be fired. The one person I kind of do want fired is the one person who can't be fired because he kind of hates the team. But I guess that's besides the point here. Essentially, Mozeliak is not going to be fired before the trade deadline, and he's going to be the one making all of the moves. So I think we have to believe that he will come through and give us a good return for some of these pitchers and potentially young outfielders. And I wanted to transition to a little bit of trade deadline talk. We talked about Flaherty and Montgomery and Hicks being pretty much gone by this point. But there's been reports that the Cardinals have been interested in some of the Mariners' young arms, and you being a resident Mariners expert, I wanted to ask about some of that. I think Logan Gilbert is the name that the Cardinals have been most tied to via MLB trade rumors. A lot of people have been reporting that. So I know you've watched him a lot. So what do you think of him, and how would he profile into the Cardinals rotation?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a good young arm to go after. He's having, honestly, I think one of his better seasons. I haven't looked at his stats, but I think he's having one of his better seasons in his career. He threw his first complete game shutout a couple weeks ago, which was really cool to watch. Yeah, I mean, I think he'd be a great guy to put in the rotation. I think he's one of the guys that has a potential to develop into an ace caliber pitcher who could be your number one guy. But I think right now he's a very solid, number 2, number 3 guy in a rotation that pretty consistently, will give you a good out. I mean, the Mariners right now lead the league, I believe, in quality starts. So, you're pretty likely to get a good outing out of a lot of their young guys. And I think it's definitely an interesting trade team, because the Mariners have a lot of, their pitching staff is one of the best in baseball. The offense, not so much. It's a little bit painful. They leave a lot of guys on base. They don't score a lot of runs. The pitchers consistently. I mean, we had a series against the Braves where we had 3 quality starts against the Braves lineup, which is very impressive. No one does that. And we still lost 2 out of 3 of the games. You can't be doing that. And the Cardinals have a lot of young hitters. And so I don't know exactly what a deal would look like, but I think there's definitely a way for a win-win trade to happen there, because the Cardinals have a lot of young bats, the Mariners have a lot of young arms, and each team needs what the other team has. So it just makes sense logistically. I'm not sure exactly what the Cardinals would be willing to give the Mariners for Logan Gilbert. It'll be interesting, because I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the talks go, because obviously a lot of the pieces that the Cardinals are trading are pitchers, and that's not really what the Mariners want. So I don't know who would be willing to give up, if that's maybe someone like Brendan Donovan. I don't know. He's maybe Tommy Edman, but Tommy Edman's not really hitting well. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how that trade would work out, because I think the Mariners are probably more interested in bats that they could use this year, not necessarily prospects, because they're still 500 right now, with a decent chance of making it at least through the wild card, especially with how the rotation's pitching. So I think they're probably more interested in major league ready bats. So I don't know what that'll look like. Probably I imagine the Cardinals, obviously don't want to trade Walker, probably don't want to trade Gordman. I imagine don't want to trade Nootbaar. So maybe Tyler O'Neill, go back to the Mariners. I don't know. Burleson, maybe, Juan Yepes. I don't know. I don't know what it would look like, but I think the Mariners are probably interested in major league ready bats. But I think if the Cardinals got Logan Gilbert, it would definitely help with the rotation for next year and long term. I think he's a great pitcher. and would definitely swat into the higher end of the Cardinals rotation, at least as it's currently constructed.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the Mariners depth charts right now, and they have Colton Wong at second base, who one of my favorite players, but he's hitting like 160 with a 456 OPS.
Yes.
So I feel like Donovan or Edman would probably slot in a lot better than him at second base, as much as it pains me to say that about him. So maybe a Donovan and like a Burleson, or maybe even just on that rotation, give him a Flaherty or Montgomery, get Gilbert back, and then get like a young pitching prospect in exchange for like Flaherty and Burleson, Flaherty and
Yeah.
Carlson, or something like that. I know a lot of fans on Twitter, Mariners fans, have been like, "We want Jordan Walker for Logan Gilbert." It's like that's just not happening.
No,
This is
not happening.
like you'd probably have to give us Logan Gilbert and George Kirby for us to even consider that, and I don't think there's really a match there for Jordan Walker to go to the Mariners or be traded really at all. It'd take a really, really hefty return. But yeah, I think Gilbert would be a good move. He can't be the only move. He's
Yes, definitely.
slotted back there behind Castillo and Kirby, two all-star caliber pitchers. We have zero all-star caliber pitchers once we trade Montgomery and Flaherty, especially. So it can't be our only move, but it's definitely would be a good start. Are there any other pitchers around the league that you'd be looking at, interested in for the Cardinals to maybe go after at the deadline?
Well, you just mentioned Shane Bieber got injured, so that's not ideal. I don't know. It's interesting. Like Dylan Cease, maybe he's not having a great year, but I think, he's obviously, been a near Cy Young caliber pitcher, last season and previous years he's pitched well. I'm not really sure. I think it's hard to find like young arms on teams that would be willing to trade them to us. I think that's a hard thing. I think another team that might be interested is maybe the Twins. They have a young pitcher named Bailey Ober that I watch the Twins a decent amount. I like him a lot, and the Twins they're similar to the Mariners. The Twins and Mariners are very similar teams. Two of the best pitching staffs in baseball. Offense can't score runs to save its life. So I think they'd definitely be interested in adding some bats, some power to the lineup to score some runs. I think yesterday in their game they won against the Oakland Athletics, but they left like 15 guys on base or something. Like it was bad. So I think they would also be another team that has a lot of pitching depth that is interested in adding some bats to back up that pitching. And so I think maybe a deal could materialize there. But I think those are the sort of teams you have to look at. Teams with a lot of pitching depth that aren't necessarily hitting super well, that might want some more bats in the lineup. Yeah, in terms of like not major league ready pitchers, I think there's a variety of teams that would want Jordan Montgomery or Jack Flaherty to boost their postseason run and would be willing to give us some high level pitching prospects for them. To sort of, help us in the future, which is one of the reasons I think that maybe looking towards a rebuild is a better idea, because I don't know how many major league ready players we're going to be able to get our hands on through trades or signing in the free agency. But the front office, like you said, doesn't really love making big free agent splashes, especially on pitchers. So I think that's why I'm more looking towards the future and getting some pitching prospects from a team that's, trying to contend. Like maybe, I don't know, there's a lot of teams, the NL West, is full of teams that think they have a chance that might, the Giants, the Dodgers, the Diamondbacks might be interested in getting Jordan Montgomery, willing to give us some pitching prospects for that. So I don't know. I mean, maybe the Orioles are interested in adding another pitcher. The rotation has not been great, but, they're obviously a competitive team. So that's another team you could look at, maybe that's willing to give up a pitching prospect or two for a real MLB pitcher right now. So I think teams like that are where you got to look to try and build on the pitching staff for next year, because I think there's a lot of room for improvement. We need probably like 3 starters. You're definitely going to need some bullpen arms. I know Helsley coming back will help, but it's still, the bullpen is not where I think any of us want it to be right now. Gallegos has pitched well, but he's also just the least clutch pitcher I've ever seen in my life. I don't know. He has a habit for giving up a home run whenever it's a close game. So, I think definitely some bullpen arms need to be added. And so that's where I think the Cardinals should look to add a lot of young pitching prospects in exchange for our MLB ready players.
Yeah, definitely need to be looking at acquiring pitchers. Pitching is what we need. I feel like I'm talking about the Angels, which is a little bit unfortunate. But yeah, before we wrap up, I want one bold trade deadline prediction and then one bold free agency prediction from you, and I'll give my own.
One bold trade deadline prediction. Well, I guess my bold prediction would be that we trade like Paul Goldschmidt or something. I don't know who to. I think, okay, to be really bold, because I know Twitter has been going crazy with it, to be really bold, I will say that we will trade Nolan Arenado to the New York Yankees. Which I know will make a bunch of people unhappy, but that is my bold prediction. Bold free agency signing. Shohei Ohtani's too obvious, so I'm not going to do that. Bold free agency signing is that we spend a lot of money and we get either Aaron Nola or Arias in the offseason is my bold free agency signing.
My bold trade deadline prediction, first of all, the Yankees Arenado thing. That trade simulator website is the worst thing ever. I think I went on there the other day and I could trade Garrett Cole and Aaron Judge for Dakota Hudson and Paul DeYoung, and it would say that the Yankees won the trade. So I don't know who's to say. But my bold trade deadline prediction is that the Angels will sell everyone, and the Cardinals will acquire Patrick Sandoval. He's an arm I've really liked for a long time. He's been underperforming a little bit. But I think if the Angels continue to slide in any way that I've seen them do in so many years past, if they end up trading Ohtani, they have to trade everyone, and the Cardinals will end up with Patrick Sandoval. As for free agency, I think Nola and Urias are kind of the only guys I can say that are not Ohtani. So I'll agree with you there and say that we get one of them. Probably Nola, because Urias has a little bit of controversy surrounding him, and the Cardinals tend to avoid guys like that. So
very true.
Let's say Aaron Nola to the Cardinals. All right, I think that pretty much wraps it up. Thanks for coming on the pod, Jacob. It's been really fun having you. Hope to have you back on sometime with the whole crew potentially.
Yeah, definitely be a lot of fun. I had a great time.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for watching this podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of those, and check out our merch. The link is going to be in the description. Got some good shirts. Rep us at the ballpark, and we really appreciate it. All right. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you next time.